Hello, everybody. We're going to have part 2 of the Mountains and Valley experiences today. So this story I'm going to share is definitely a valley experience. And valley experiences are something that comes with journeying with God. They come in your life even if you don't journey with God. It's just so much more productive when you do walk with God, because then those valleys can be turned for your good, and they can strengthen you and strengthen your resolve. And God needs to strengthen our resolve to turn us into the diamonds that He's making us into. So this experience I'm going to talk about today is my wife's battle with Lyme disease. And I want to make sure that y'all know that I am not telling this story so that someone who thinks they have Lyme disease or something can be afraid or nervous. And I'm telling it from my perspective. It's very important that I say that, because this is really both my wife and my testimony. Because when your other half walks through Lyme disease or any kind of fiery trial, inherently you're going to walk through that in your own way. And so this is my side of that journey. So this is going back about 5 years, and I was working in the business world, and I had, if I remember correctly, I had just gotten promoted to a management job. And so with that job came a ton of extra responsibilities and a lot of pressure and a really steep learning curve. I had so many things I needed to learn to function properly in this new job, and it was a lot of pressure. This was a really, it was just a special job, but a difficult one. And so we had just had our second child, Priya, and all of a sudden my wife wasn't feeling good. And something with the pregnancy and she just lost a lot of her strength. She was feeding the baby, and so she's at home at my mom's house, and she's got our older son, who's 2 years old at this time, and our newborn. And it was just a struggle. It was a struggle for my wife to get up out of bed. She couldn't provide for the baby anymore, and it was a difficult season. And so in that season, we didn't have clear explanations for what was going on. The doctors couldn't understand it, couldn't figure it out. Many people that we, experts that we went to, they didn't know what was going on. And so finally, Dr. Google, I don't suggest Dr. Google. Dr. Google is naughty. You don't want that. However, at that time in that season, that's what happens. My wife turned to Dr. Google. She figured out that she thought maybe it's this Lyme disease. And so we went to a specialist who did some tests on her, and she was clinically diagnosed with Lyme disease. And thus this journey begins. And this was a journey that took us, I would say it was probably about 2 years. But at the beginning of this season, my wife was sick. She couldn't get out of bed. She was basically bedridden. We had a toddler at home and a newborn. And we were living at my mom's house. And I love my mom, but anytime you live, with your parents, it's, of course, there's that sort of clashing of kingdoms a little bit. And it was just hard. Life was hard. And it got to the point where my wife, she started getting really thin. She basically was just like skin and bones, and like I said, she couldn't get out of bed. And she was speaking a lot of death, kind of just feeling like she wasn't gonna make it and feeling like she was gonna die. And she was telling me, what her wishes would be if she passed away. And here I am in this new job and all this challenge at work, and then you got everything going on at home. But my wife, it just seemed like she was too weak to fight. And I'm like, I had been so used to seeing God just show up, heal someone instantly, heal me instantly, heal someone else instantly, that for me, when that didn't happen, I was like, what's going on? So I had to turn to my king to get answers. And so I said, Lord, like, what is going on? And then he took me on a journey. And this was a journey of me fighting and contending for my wife. Okay? And so it started with a season of learning about prayer, if I remember correctly. And prior to this season, I'll be honest, I was a Christian. I would see God do miracles. I had, like faith to see miracles. But for some reason, my prayer life wasn't that strong. Like I didn't feel like, I didn't understand prayer, if that makes sense. Like I didn't understand the power in prayer. And so that's when I went down this road of trying to fight for my wife. And so God started teaching me about prayer. And I was studying the scriptures, I was reading books, and I was praying. And I was really going deeper in learning about prayer and the power of prayer and how to pray and what to pray and that communing with God. But as I was praying, oh man, I think I got I got it a little mixed up. But I think the first thing was I learned about fasting, and I started fasting. And I started seeing the power in fasting. I read a few books on it. I read books by, let's see who I read by. Mahesh Shabda has a really good book on fasting. Also, I read multiple books by Derek Prince. He's got one, something like Changing the Course of History Through Prayer and Fasting. What a good book. The Mahesh Shabda one I strongly recommend too. But anyways, I'm reading these books on fasting. And then I was fasting. And again, when it's not enough to read. You have to exercise these things. You have to put it in action. And so here I am, I'm fasting, and I'm like, God, I'm fasting and I'm seeing some breakthrough with me, but I'm not seeing the breakthrough for my wife. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to learn how to pray. So then I started learning about prayer and how to pray. And from there, I still wasn't seeing the breakthrough I was looking for. And I'm like, God, I've done everything you told me. I've been, fasting. I've been praying. Is there something more? And then he started teaching me about spiritual warfare. So now I'm fasting, I'm praying. Now it's spiritual warfare, and I start warring. And I probably went through every Derek Prince teaching on that like 5 or 10 times. I would listen to him on my way to work. I'd listen to him on my way home. I mean, my days during this season, just so you know, this is what my days looked like. If you want to talk about a valley season, I would wake up in the morning early. I'd take the dogs out. I'd make sure everything that they were cared for, they had food, water, taken out. Then I would take care of my kids. I'd make them breakfast. I'd get their food. I'd do whatever I could there. Then I would start getting ready for work while catering to my wife, trying to help get everything set up so that she has as little work to do that day as possible. And then I get in my car and I drive an hour to work. The whole time I'm on my way to work, I'm like studying, I'm listening to teachings, I'm praying, I'm talking to God. I get to work and it's like total craziness because you're in this new job and it's like overwhelming. You got to figure it all out. And then I would get phone calls from my wife saying like, I need you to come home right away. And I'd say, why? And she'd just, be crying and just different. It seemed like there was a different issue every day. So now I'm kind of in, the hot seat with my work because I'm constantly like leaving early and trying to, and so then I would drive home, an hour home, I'd get home and there'd be, different issues going on at home. As soon as I got home, it was like my wife was just totally spent and I had to take over. So now I'm cooking, I'm taking care of the children, I'm cleaning, I'm putting the kids to bed. Then I'm cleaning up after the kids. I'm getting Janali in bed, getting her all taken care of, ministering to her, teaching, loving on her. And then after all that's done, then I can go and I can do my work for my employment. And after that's all done, late at night, if I want to spend time with the Lord, That's the only time I can do it. So 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, I'm beginning my devotionals. Only to wake up the next day at 5 a.m. or whatever and do all this all over again. So it was little sleep and just very chaotic season. But again, in this season, God's teaching me. He's growing me, stretching me. So now you got fasting, you got prayer, and now starting to do some spiritual warfare stuff. Then we did some things like, people have different perspectives on this. So it's 6 of one, half dozen the other, whatever your perspective is. But we basically did this thing called house cleaning, where we started going through all our stuff and like basically having a fire and burning like idols, burning anything we found in our house that shouldn't be there. And from those burn sessions, as we called them, which, man, it was some crazy spiritual experiences that happened there. I'd love to teach on that someday. But from there, then, we started kind of looking into like deliverance and like self-deliverance type stuff. And we were praying through different things, praying through our history, our past, different stuff. I'm not a fan of looking for a devil under every rock, but at the same time, there are spiritual things that have, that affect us. I believe that's what I believe, and I go to the scriptures for that. So from that, basically, it just continued, and this dragged on and on and on to the point where my work like kind of was starting to have less grace for the trial I was walking through, but it was an amazing season of growth. And so coming out of that season, or not really coming out of it, but a continuation of it, from there, then God starts telling me to do some crazy things like sell your stuff, like get rid of your fig collection. I was like, I was a hobby. I had all these fig trees. God told me get rid of them. And he just started telling me to do all these things. And I'm like, God, why do you want me to do this? If I sell all my things, then I'll have to go buy them back for more. And what I didn't understand was he was about to call us into the mission field. But this is another key that I learned in that season, is the power of a prophetic word. So during this season, and I'm sure Lana probably knows this, but during this season, my wife started reading these prophetic words on Elijah list. And she'd read them each day, but there was like 2 different prophets, but one in particular, that their words were just always whatever we were going through at that moment. Like, they were so spot on. It would be like what we talked about that morning, and then all of a sudden a prophetic word comes out, and there it is. And so my wife would read these, and she'd send them to me and be like, hey, you need to read this. And I'm a slow reader, and I'm a meticulous reader, and I had everything going on at work, and I'd say, honey, like, only send me a word if you think it pertains to me, because like I've got so much going on, I don't have time for this. And so it would just turn out that every time Lana put up a word, my wife would send it to me, and I'd read it and be like, oh my gosh, this is like so dead on. So those prophetic words helped carry my wife through this season, because then she would like hold on to the words that God would speak through his prophets, and hold it for her. And so my wife, and I'm not going to tell her whole story, but she had to learn how to contend herself. So she had seen me, praying for the sick and seeing them healed and all these cool testimonies for years. But what she didn't, but she was kind of living her faith was almost like through mine in that regard. And so she had to learn how to believe for healing herself. And so I believe that was a huge part of this process, was that God wasn't just growing me. He was growing me in the areas he wanted to grow me, but he was doing things to my wife where she would then have her own faith, which we all need to have our own faith to enter the kingdom. And so he started growing her. She started declaring life over herself. I would come home from work, and all of a sudden there'd be like, scriptures all over the walls, like all over the house. She would just declare the word over herself. I shall not die, but live and declare the glorious works of the Lord, and things like that. And she's smiling now as I'm saying these words. But it was a powerful season. It was a trial season. And I would say coming out of it, that wasn't the end of the story. We'll pick up part 2 of the story later. But I just wanted to share that to say, you know what? There are seasons in your life where you have trials, where it's difficult, but God's growing you. He's stretching you. These are some of the things I learned in that season that grew my faith. So I mentioned the fasting to build your faith, prayer and intercession, spiritual warfare, deliverance, and destroying idols, holding on to the promises when you can't see it. And then the last couple things, the power of prophecy, and also your faith has to be your own. You can't rely on someone else's faith. And so that's what I got. I hope that encourages you guys. These are some things that will grow your faith. It will stretch you, but please know, don't be afraid of the valleys. The valleys are where God is making he's making his diamonds so that they can shine on a hilltop. Amen.
Flip it over.
Oh, my wife's got something to say.
So as Tim was sharing, I just have in my heart, I think we're going to do a part 2 with my side of the story maybe. So I think that maybe tomorrow I'll do my version, and that way you guys can see both, so that both, husband and wife can see both sides. So stay tuned.